All right, guys, so today we're going to be talking about surface area of three-dimensional figures. Before we do that, let's go over some of the basic vocabulary. Lateral faces, those are the faces or surface of a solid when it's on its sides. So this basically does not include the bases of the figure. So if I'm looking at this rectangular prism, so I'm going to say that the bases are the top and the bottom, right? So then this side here, this side here, this side here, and this side here would be the bases. So it would be the lateral faces. You do not include the top or the bottom. I know that whenever I did this, it looks like I am, but it's actually not included. So you're only looking at the faces. For the lateral edges, these are the intersections of two lateral faces. So again, that includes, if we look at this right here would be considered a lateral edge because it's when two lateral faces meet. Down here, you would not consider that a lateral edge because that includes the base. So the surface area is going to be the area of all of the faces combined. That includes the bases, all right? For the lateral area, that's the area of only the lateral faces. So that does not include the bases. Anytime we're saying lateral anything, we're only talking about everything not including the bases. And when we talk about the complete surface area or the total surface area, then we're talking about all of the area of all of them combined. Now a net is a pattern that you can cut and fold to make a three-dimensional figure. Here's an example of a net of a cube. I know that it's really bad, but that's okay. If you were to fold that up, then that would create a cube. A right prism is where the faces in a prism meet to form 90-degree angles. So like the example to the left, it's just your basic rectangular prism. The base and the lateral faces do meet at a 90-degree angle. Whereas an oblique prism is where the faces and the prisms in a where the faces and the bases in a prism do not form a 90-degree angle. So if we look at the figure on the side, that's kind of an example of an oblique prism. I know that it's very poorly drawn. Please excuse that. All right. Okay, here are the formulas for lateral and surface area of both a right prism and of a right cylinder. So for a right prism, the lateral area is always going to be the perimeter of the prism times the height. All right, so that's going to be the lateral area. That means just the sides of the prism, not including the bases. Whereas the surface area, you would have to find the area of the base, multiply it by 2, since in a prism we have 2 bases, and then add it with the lateral area. So another way you can think about this is if you have, we know that from our previous unit, we know that in order to find the area of a base, it would be the apothem times the perimeter, right? And it would usually be 1/2 times the apothem times the perimeter, but since there's 2 of them, you're multiplying 2 times the 1/2, so then it just becomes apothem times perimeter, and then plus the perimeter times the height, which is going to be the lateral area. For the lateral area and surface area of a right cylinder, that's going to be the lateral area is going to be 2 times pi times pi r times h, right? So we know that it's going to basically be the same thing. It's basically the perimeter times the height. We know that the perimeter of a circle is going to be the circumference, which is 2 pi r, right? So if we're doing 2 pi r times the height, it basically is the same thing as perimeter times the height. For the surface area, same thing. You're going to be doing 2 times the base of that cylinder, and then plus the lateral area. So that's for surface area. So we know that for the surface area of a cylinder, specifically of a right cylinder, it would be 2 times the base, so the area of the base. We know that the base of the area of a circle is going to be pi r squared, so we'll do 2 times pi r squared plus the circumference times the height. All right, so now let's do some examples. So for this first one, we've got a prism. We know we're asked to find the lateral area and the surface area. So for the first one, to find the lateral area, we're going to do perimeter of the base times the height of the entire figure. Now, we're told that all of the sides are congruent, so then I know that if one side is 4, all 3 sides are going to be 4. Which means that the base is going to be 4 plus 4 plus 4, which is 12. So then for the lateral area, it's going to be 12 times my height, which is 7.2. Now, I do want to let you guys know something. I know that in this case, we're already using decimals, but if we weren't using decimals, it is so very important that you keep everything in exact form until the very end. Okay, don't round, don't do intermediate rounding, because if you do, you will end up with an incorrect answer. So please make sure that you keep everything in exact form on a test or a quiz. Okay, so when I put this in the calculator, my lateral area is 86.4. It's exactly 86.4. Okay, now for my surface area is 2 times the base plus the length. Okay, now let's first look at the 2b, the base. I'm going to first try to solve for the base. I know that the base of a triangle is going to be 1/2 base times height. Now I can see that the base is going to be 4, but for my height, I'm going to need to use a little bit of Pythagorean theorem. So if I look at the base, I know that this whole thing is 4, and I'm trying to figure out the height. So in order to do that, I know that it's going to be half of this. It's going to be the altitude, which is going to cut the base in half, because I know that this is a regular triangle. So this is going to be 2, and this is going to be 2, right? So in order to find the height, I'm simply going to use Pythagorean theorem. So then I'll be doing 2 squared plus my height squared. You know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So 2 squared plus h squared, which is my height, equals c squared, which is my base. So c squared, right? So now, not my base, my hypotenuse. So then I'm just going to go ahead and solve for my hypotenuse. If I was to do this, my hypotenuse would end up being 2√3. Now, I do have to keep that as 2√3. Do not try to round that. Don't try to put that as a decimal, because then you will end up with an incorrect answer. So you'll have, going back to my base, I know that my base is going to be 1/2 times my base, which is 4, we said, and then times the height, which is 2√3. Okay, so now I can use that and plug it back into the area into the surface area. So I know that 1/2 times 4 is just 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So then I know that my base is going to be 4√3. So then I can go ahead and plug that back in here. So I have S equals 2 times 4√3 plus my lateral area, which I already found that was 86.4. So then, if I was to put this in the calculator exactly the way it is, I would end up with my surface area is approximately, this is where I can round, 100.3. For this next one, I've got a rectangular prism. So again, I know that my lateral area is going to be perimeter times height, and my surface area is 2b times or plus my lateral area. So first off, I need to figure out my lateral area. Now, since this is a rectangular prism, we know that it could actually have different bases. So like it could either be the 2 sides as the base, or it could be the ones on the bottom and the top as the base. So for this, just look at the figure, and if it just do the bottom and the top. So those are going to be the base. So I have that my lateral area is going to be my perimeter. So my perimeter is going to be 12 plus 6 times 2, right? So 2 times 12 plus 6. And then times my height, which is 3. When I plug that into the calculator, I get that my lateral surface area is 108. So that's my lateral area. For my surface area, I'm going to do 2 times the base. So I know that my base is just going to be length times width. So it's going to be 2 times 12 times 6. And then plus my lateral area, which I already found was 108. So then if I was to plug that into the calculator, I would get that my surface area is exactly 256. And this would be 256 centimeters squared. I don't know if I did that for the first one. Sorry, you do have to include your units, so this would be inches squared as well. Okay, for this next one's going to require a lot of work. If I were you, I would suggest that you try this on your own first, pause the video, and then get back to it when you're done. Alright, so I went ahead and did it just for the sake of time and not making this video incredibly long, which is already becoming. So first off, if you were to find the lateral area, I know that the lateral area is the perimeter times the height, right? So if you look at this figure, we're told that the base edges of a regular hexagonal prism is 14. If it's regular, then I know that all the sides are the same, which means that all 6 sides are also going to be 14. So the perimeter, I'm just going to do 14 times 6, which is 84, and then times the height, which is 25. So when you do that, you should have gotten that your lateral area is 2100, right? So 2100, and that is square inches, right? Or sorry, not inches, feet, so feet squared. For the surface area, I know that the surface area is going to be 2b plus the lateral area, right? So now, in order to do this, you need to do several things, right? So I know in order to find the base of a hexagonal prism, I'm going to need to use the formula B equals 1/2 apothem times perimeter. You guys already know this. You've done this before, right? So now I know that my perimeter is 84. I've already found that. And one thing that I'm missing, though, is my apothem. In order to find my apothem, I have to draw out what I know, okay? So here's kind of my, here's my base. So first off, I need to know the central angles of a hexagon. So you would do 360 divided by 6. That gives you 60 degrees, right? So each of the central angles is going to be 60 degrees. Now, if I was to draw my apothem here, I know that my apothem is both an angle bisector of my central angle, and it's also a perpendicular bisector of the opposite side. So because of this, I know that this is going to be 30, and this is going to be 30, right? And then I know that this is going to be 7, and this is going to be 7, since the whole thing is 14. So in order to find my apothem, I'm simply going to use I'm simply going to use trig functions. So if I look at this, I kind of redrew this triangle off to the side. I know that this is 30 degrees, and I'm given that the opposite side is 7, and I'm trying to find the apothem, which in this case is the adjacent side. Which of the trig functions uses both adjacent and the opposite? Well, it would be tangent. So I would do tangent of 30 equals 7, which is the opposite, over the adjacent, which is A, and I would find that my apothem is 7 over tangent of 30. Keep it as 7 over tangent 30. Do not try to simplify that, not until the very end, right? So now, for the area of my base, I'm going to do base equals 1/2 times my apothem, which I just found, times the perimeter of the base, which I already found was 84. So then I end up with my base is equal to 294 over tangent 30. Notice that again, I am not trying to simplify, I'm not trying to round that, I'm not trying to convert that into a decimal just yet. Now, since I know that my surface area requires that I multiply my base times 2, I went ahead and did that. So for 2b, for my when I multiply my base times 2, it's just going to end up being 588 over tangent 30. So then I can go back here. So my 2b is 588 over tangent 30. And then my lateral area, which I found earlier, was 2100. So when I combine those, I get 3,118.45 feet squared. And again, make sure that you do not round until the very, very end. I cannot stress that enough. Okay, so for these next two, we're finding the lateral and surface area of these right cylinders. Now, this first one's relatively simple. Again, I'm going to use the basic formulas, which is the lateral area equals perimeter times height, and the surface area equals 2 base times the lateral, or plus the lateral area. Now, since this is a cylinder, I know that my perimeter is basically going to be my circumference, so it's going to be 2 pi r, and then times my height, which in this case is 5. So if I was to do this, I would get my lateral area is 12, because my radius is 6, so this would be 12 pi times my height, which is 5, so my lateral area is 60 pi, okay? For my surface area, I would do 2b plus my lateral area. Now for my base, it's going to be pi r squared, right? So I'm going to do 2 times pi r squared, which in this case, r is 6, so r squared is 36, so this would be 36 pi. And then plus my lateral area, which I already found, was 60 pi. So then my surface area, if I was to plug this into the calculator, it would end up being 132 pi. Alright, so this next problem is probably one of the trickiest types of problems in this entire unit. It's a lot to remember, so I need you guys to pay very close attention here. Alright, so I know that for lateral area, generally speaking, is the perimeter of the base times the height. Now, you have to look at this figure, and you see that the perimeter is only part of the circumference, right? And then you've also got this bit and this bit, right? So the perimeter here is you're going to actually add this portion of the circumference, or this arc length, and then you're going to add the two sides, right? So now, we already know how to find arc length, right? I'm given that this portion here is 90 degrees of the whole circle. Now, the rest of the circle that's actually shown is going to be 270 degrees. So if this portion here is 90 degrees, then that means that this portion here is going to be 270 degrees, right? So now, 270 out of 360 is going to equal 3/4. So that means that this whole portion is only 3/4 of the total circumference, right? So then for my perimeter, whatever I get for the circumference, I'm going to multiply it by 3/4. And then I'm going to add the 16 and the 16, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So I have 3/4 of, so right now I'm just dealing with the perimeter, right? So for my perimeter, it's going to be 3/4 times the circumference, which we know the circumference is 2 pi r. So 2 pi r, which in this case, my radius is 16, so times 16. And then I also have to add the 16 and the 16. So that's going to be 2 times 16. All right, so this whole thing is actually my perimeter. And then I'm going to multiply all of that by my height, which is 24. So now I'm just going to simplify. So I have my lateral area. I don't know, you could just call that L. You don't have to do lateral area. That's actually a little weird. So then when you do that, you end up with 24 pi plus 32 times 24. And I'm actually going to keep this in exact form, so I'm just going to go ahead and distribute the 24. So I'd end up with L equals 576 pi plus 768. Now I'm going to keep this in exact form until the very end. Now on a test, if it was to ask you to find the lateral area and not the surface area, you could just simplify it from there. But then when you're asked to find the surface area, you have to keep that in exact form until the end. So for the surface area, I'm going to do 2 times my base, plus my lateral area, right, which I already found my lateral area. Now again, I know that my base is going to be a circle, but it's only going to be part of the circle. It's only going to be 3/4 of the circle, right? So in order to do this, once again, I'm going to do 2 times base of a circle is pi r squared, but this is only going to be 3/4 of pi r squared, right? So it's going to be 3/4 times pi times 16 squared, right? It's going to be 3/4 of that. And then plus my lateral area, which I already found was 576 pi plus 768. Okay, so then when I simplify this, this ends up being, my surface area is 2 times 192 pi plus 576 pi plus 768. And then when I do this, my surface area equals 384 pi plus 576 pi plus 768, and then my surface area ends up being 960 pi plus 768. You could, if this was on a test, you could go ahead and simplify that, put that in your calculator, and convert it into a decimal, but for right now, I'm just going to keep it in exact form. So that would be your final answer. I know that this is a very time-consuming process, but the more practice you get, the better, the easier it becomes. So good luck.